Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So David Cameron toured Europe again last week, continuing his renegotiation of Britain's EU membership ahead of the referendum. He knows that whatever he comes back with will not persuade all his cabinet colleagues, so they'll be free to campaign for an exit. But this morning, the Prime Minister made it clearer than ever that he would be campaigning to stay in the EU. This is what he said to Andrew Marr.
My aim is clear. Best of both worlds for Britain, the massive prize of sorting out what frustrates us about Europe, but staying in a reformed Europe. And that prize is closer than it was, and I'm going to work round the clock to get that done. The government's not going to be sort of neutral about this issue, with people on one side or on the other. My intention is that the conclusion of the negotiation, the Cabinet has a discussion and reaches a clear recommendation to the British people of what we should do. I hope that will be staying in a reformed European Union, because I will have got a good negotiation for Britain. And at that point, a clear government position that I'm saying, you know, members of the Cabinet, ministers who have long-standing held views on a different basis, they'll be able to campaign in a personal capacity.
And we're joined now by the Eurosceptic Conservative MP, David Davis. Welcome back to the programme. So the Prime Minister's made it pretty clear, I think we can agree, that he's going to lead the in campaign. Yeah. Who should lead the out campaign?
Oh, God knows. I don't actually think the personalities matter on the out campaign. The Prime Minister matters on the in campaign. There's a very big symbolism there. But on the out campaign, you've got Nigel Lawson, you've got a whole series of other people, and you'll have, come the day, no doubt 3, 4, 5 cabinet ministers who will be...
Doesn't it need to be a better known public figure than Nigel Lawson, who was Chancellor in the 1980s, or Chris Grayling, or even yourself?
No. I mean, people will not make the decision as whether they vote to stay in or leave on the basis of which nice, pretty face is leading the campaign. They'll make it probably on one basis alone, and that is, will it be good for my job or bad for my job? That's where the argument will be. It'll be about economics and about jobs, not about 3 million jobs and all these other bogus numbers that come up. It'll be about my job. Is my industry protected? And so that's what it'll be about. It won't
Boris
be about
Johnson, Theresa May,
there'll be a lot of argument in Westminster. That'll be very much the Westminster argument. Oh, should Boris lead? Should Theresa lead? Whatever. It won't matter.
Won't matter at all?
Won't matter at all. What matters is the tactics and strategy, how you get the message across. And that will be decided, actually, before the conclusion of the negotiation.
Nigel Farage has had a pretty torrid time since the general election, culminating in the assassination attempt that apparently wasn't. Is he now is he a liability to the Leave campaign now?
No, probably not. I mean, he's got about 3 million people who are supportive of him. Everybody else...
Supportive of his party.
Supportive of his party, which broadly means him. I mean, he is his party to a very large extent. So, no, I don't think he's a liability. Everybody else knows what he's like. Everybody else knows what his party's like.
He's not lost credibility.
Well, he will slip backwards since the general election, no doubt about that. But again, I don't think the personalities will matter. This will be a very personal decision to individuals that will affect.
What percentage of Tory MPs do you reckon will vote to leave?
Well, it's a majority. I don't know what the number will be. I mean, in fact, if you sort of did it tomorrow and there was no other effect, probably 2/3 or so.
Really? Is that including the payroll vote?
I think so, yeah.
So 2/3 of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, you believe, will vote to leave?
I would think. But, no, I say that's if you did it tomorrow. But I think the thing you've got to bear in mind is what the dynamics this will be. You've, like me, lived through an awful lot of prime ministers and ministers returning from Europe and declaring victory. Yeah, and what happens is they arrive on Monday and at 3:30 declare their victory. We have no other information. Nothing else has been published. Most of the decisions have been taken in private. No journalists there, and so we just have. And what will happen is there will be a sort of wave out of that, and I suspect some of that 2/3 will evaporate.
So come the day, how many?
Probably half.
Probably. So, but even 50% of the Conservative Party.
I should think so.
How many cabinet ministers do you reckon will exercise their right to campaign to leave?
Not more than half a dozen. So 5 or 6, maybe. I can't think of more than 5 or 6 who would.
Ian Duncan-Smith?
Duncan-Smith, maybe Theresa May, maybe Sajid Javid, maybe Chris Grayling, or certainly Chris Grayling, Ian Duncan-Smith, maybe one other. You know.
What's your reaction to the story this morning that senior officials in Downing Street are vetting and in some cases altering speeches by ministers in Parliament to tone down Eurosceptic comments?
There's nothing new in that. I mean, that's been going happened to my speeches back 20 years ago. So,
I mean, is this the start of the government machine?
oh yes,
getting behind the stay-in
I mean,
campaign?
there were two, in my view, there were 2 or 3 things that David Cameron said this morning which were very important. But he made it very, very plain: the government machine will go gangbusters on one side of this argument, and it started already.
It's now being suggested that Mr. Cameron...
And nothing unusual in that, by the way.
I understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Cameron might get some sort of deal which curtails in-work benefits for migrants. Is that a game changer? Does that swing the referendum his way?
He said, or something equally powerful, i.e. not important at all. Because think what this is about. Why do people come from Romania to here? They come because the minimum wage here is twice as big as the average wage in Romania.
And about to get bigger.
And about to get bigger. And in fact, in 2020, according to the Treasury's strategy, tax credits won't matter. That's why they wanted to abolish them. Remember all the big argument last year? So in 2020, this whole strategy will be irrelevant.
What's your best guess for the date of the referendum?
Sometime in the middle late this year. I would think probably September of this year.
No, not a summer one then.
Well, they might, but they're going to have trouble getting it through quickly. I mean, they've got certain limitations now built into the law, and if they get it through, if they get a conclusion in February, then they might get the summer. But my hunch is they won't get through in February because, bear in mind, they've got 4 basic claims. Only one of which has really been talked about at the moment. You know, some of the others, the parliamentary proposals, are not. The defence of the city, the euro, all this stuff. If it's either going to be just words and not matter, which is where it looks at the moment, or it's going to be serious. The city, for example, basically needs a veto in euro legislation relating to financial services. If it doesn't get that, it's meaningless.
Okay. Yeah. If Mr. Cameron loses the referendum, does he have to resign as Prime Minister?
Well, truth be told, that's almost the least important question. I mean, the other big thing...
Is there an answer to it?
I don't know. I don't know.
Should he, in your view?
Not necessarily. It depends on how it goes and the terms and so on.
Oh, right.
But there is...
Briefly.
There's one important. He said this morning there's no plans for Brexit. Now, this is actually disgraceful. Because you've got 2 moderately likely outcomes. We don't know which it'll be.
Well, there were no plans for Scottish independence in the run-up to the referendum.
I suspect there were, but there are no plans for Brexit.
We couldn't find them, and we looked pretty hard.
But there are no plans for Brexit, and that's really, really serious because it's a very complicated operation to carry out if it happens.
We'll leave it there for now, but we'll be returning to you, David Davis. Thank you. Nick, there's no doubt that the Prime Minister is gearing up to campaign to stay in with whatever he brings back from Brussels.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he is determined to keep Britain in the European Union. I mean, his official language is that I want to renegotiate better terms, and if I get the right deal, then I'll keep us in. But in a way, sort of the mask slipped today when Andrew Marr said to him, so what about Brexit? What about the preparations for that? And he said that would not be the right answer. But he did another interesting thing today, which again was a reprise of the Scottish referendum on the point that you were talking to David Davis about, which is that he was saying that if he lost the referendum, he would not resign. He absolutely wanted that message to get out there because he really wants to sort of kill the idea of a link between his future and the referendum result. But as with the Scottish referendum, in private, he prepared a resignation letter.
Right. The other thing that he made clear to Andrew Marr this morning is that the government machine is not going to be neutral. The government machine is going to back Mr. Cameron in this referendum.
And I think that's one of the reasons I would disagree with David Davis and say that the Out campaign needs a big figurehead, because you're going to have the full weight of an institutional machine behind a yes vote. And at the moment, who have you got on the no side? You've got really Nigel Farage is a problem. And we know that he appeals, as you say, to 4.5 million voters at the general election. That is not a majority. And people need to feel, I think, for the no side, that they're not voting in a kind of little England way. There is a responsible case to be made. And someone needs to make the case. Why I think somebody like Boris Johnson is going to become, he's going to be pressured enormously to say which side he's going to jump for.
But if David Davis is right, and at least 50% of the parliamentary party, including the payroll vote, is going to vote to leave, many will campaign to leave, that's a huge problem for the Conservatives and for Mr. Cameron.
I think the problem is especially acute if the final result is so narrow that the result can be plausibly attributed to a credible sitting Conservative Prime Minister having campaigned to remain in. If a Eurosceptic backbencher or even a cabinet member can say, had David Cameron campaigned the other way or campaigned less vociferously, then we might have got our, in many cases, lifetime's ambition to leave the European Union. then that
And then
does...
it could linger. If it's close, it will
Yeah.
linger in the Tory party.
That introduces a real dose of poison. My guess is that the party will fall apart. I'm much less certain the party will fall apart than I was 18 months, 2 years ago. And I think the fact that they know they can govern for another 9 years if they just maintain...
Nine? Have we changed the constitution?
I think...
Well, you're assuming they win the next
I
election?
think the presence of Jeremy Corbyn effectively guarantees them the next election. And that, I think, gives them an incentive to behave
Just
themselves.
checking that the Prime Minister hadn't changed things.
Not officially.
All right. Helen, the Tory split over Europe is, particularly if the referendum is this year, is going to be apparent for all to see. And as David Davis was saying, it could be a very serious split if it's right down the middle of the parliamentary party. Is there a possibility that the party managers lose control of this split, that this becomes a serious historical split for the Tories?
My feeling about the split is that it is probably going to be quite contained because they have one advantage that Labour don't, which is power. They want to stay in power. They are at the moment seen as a credible party of government and they want to remain that way. It's also not a kind of existential issue in the way that Trident is, in the sense that one of the reasons that the Trident battle in Labour is so fraught is the feeling that this is something that's happened before to a Labour Party and rendered it unelectable. You know, there is a huge amount of feeling over Europe among activists. Is the country so excited about Europe?
Well, the turnout might be quite low.
Exactly. Is the Tory party turning against Europe actually going to turn off a huge amount of voters from them? I would argue not.
Well, the Tory party was in power when it repealed the Corn Laws. I remember covering it night after night. In 1846, I think it was.
No, but you cheated. You took it all off Twitter.
No, it was the quill pen that I took it off of. That split the party for a generation. Is it potentially as serious as that for them?
Well, there are Eurosceptics who have been saying for some time that this will be a split to rival the Corn Law split. And as you say, they were in power at the time. But if my memory serves me correctly, they were not in power as a majority for about 30 to 35 years after that split.
They weren't.
And that is why what the Prime Minister announced last week when he said that ministers will be able to campaign on either side was so vitally important in ensuring that the split that will come, and it will be a split, does not turn into a civil war. And that announcement is really important for managing the tone and managing the aftermath. And I think that Downing Street are obviously hoping that it won't be a Corn Law split, but obviously some of those on the other side are absolutely hoping that it will be. My instinct is that by allowing ministers to campaign as they see fit, I think you will avoid it being that sort of, century sort of the worst split.
Yeah, I think you may be right, but as we also know, sometimes the Tories, when it comes to Europe, just can't help themselves.
Indeed.
As we saw with Maastricht.